My name is Vivian Cross, and I spent 23 years teaching computers to smell lies. Not the human kind of lies, the digital ones. The kind that hide in metadata, lurk in IP addresses, and whisper through transaction timestamps. I was the senior fraud analyst at Cordell Financial Services, a mid-sized investment firm in Chicago that managed about $4 billion in client assets. My job was simple: stop the bad guys before they could touch our money. I was good at it. Maybe too good, because comfort breeds carelessness, and carelessness breeds disaster. The disaster had a name: Blake Harrison, our new vice president of operations. He arrived on a Monday morning in September with a handshake that lasted 2 seconds too long and a smile that never reached his eyes. Blake came from a fintech startup in San Francisco that had burned bright and died faster. He brought buzzwords like agile finance and friction-free transactions with him like they were holy scripture. I first met Blake in the conference room during his introductory presentation. He wore a navy suit that probably cost 3 months of my salary and spoke in that clipped, confident tone that tech executives use when they're trying to sound revolutionary. "We're hemorrhaging opportunity costs," Blake announced, clicking through slides filled with graphs that sloped upward at impossible angles. "Our current approval protocols add 17 unnecessary touchpoints to every wire transfer over $500,000. That's 17 chances for clients to change their minds, 17 moments where we lose competitive advantage." I sat in the back row, arms crossed, watching him dance around the actual word he meant: security checks. Those 17 touchpoints he hated so much were my fraud detection system. Each one was a tripwire I'd carefully placed over 2 decades of watching thieves evolve. Blake's eyes found mine during the Q&A. "Vivian, right? Our fraud guru?" The way he said guru made it sound like fortune teller. "That's correct," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I manage the fraud prevention protocols." Blake smiled that empty smile again. "Tell me, Vivian, in your expert opinion, how many legitimate transactions get delayed by your current system?" I knew this trap. I'd seen variations of it before from executives who thought speed and safety were opposing forces instead of dance partners. "Last quarter, we flagged 4,200 transactions for additional review," I said. "Of those, we stopped 11 actual fraud attempts totaling $8.3 million. The false positive rate was 0.7%, well below industry standard." Blake nodded slowly, like a teacher disappointed by a student's answer. "So you're telling me that to catch 11 bad transactions, you delayed over 4,000 good ones? That's a 99.7% inconvenience rate for legitimate clients." The room went quiet. Other executives shifted in their seats. "I'd call it a 99.7% protection rate," I countered. "Those 11 stopped frauds? 3 were business email compromise attacks. 2 were account takeovers. The rest were sophisticated social engineering. If any of those had succeeded, we'd be dealing with regulatory fines, client lawsuits, and reputation damage that would cost exponentially more than a few hours of transaction delay." Blake clicked to his next slide. It showed a competitor's logo with the text "Real-time transfers, zero friction, market leader." "Our competitors are processing same-day wires with minimal verification," he said. "They're eating our lunch because we're stuck in 2005 security theater. I'm proposing we streamline our system. Cut the approval chain from 17 steps to 5. Trust our clients. Move fast." I raised my hand. Blake looked annoyed but nodded. 5 steps won't catch a sophisticated attack," I said. "Modern fraud isn't some guy in a basement. It's organized crime with IT departments." "That's why we have insurance," Blake replied smoothly. "And that's why we hire people like you to build smarter systems, not slower ones. We need evolution, not paranoia." The word paranoia hung in the air like smoke. I felt my face flush but kept my expression neutral. After the meeting, I returned to my desk in the corner of the 3rd floor, surrounded by monitors displaying real-time transaction feeds. My colleague Marcus stopped by. He was 28, brilliant with pattern recognition algorithms, and one of the few people who understood what we actually did. That was intense, Marcus said, perching on the edge of my desk. Blake's going to push this through, isn't he? I pulled up my email and started drafting a formal objection. Not if I document every reason why it's dangerous, I replied. We have protocols for a reason. Board approval, risk assessment, compliance review. Marcus gave me a look that was part sympathy, part concern. Vivian, Blake has the CEO's ear. He was right, of course. Blake wasn't just some middle manager pushing a pet project. He'd been personally recruited by our CEO, Anthony Reeves, who wanted Cordell to compete with younger, faster firms. Anthony saw Blake as the future. He saw me as the past. Over the next 2 weeks, Blake systematically dismantled my defenses. First, he reorganized the operations department, putting himself directly above me in the chain of command. Then he scheduled a series of efficiency audits where he questioned every fraud prevention checkpoint. Why do we verify the recipient's bank details twice? He asked during one audit. Because typos and account numbers are how business email compromise starts, I explained. Scammers send fake invoices with slightly altered banking information. The client thinks they're paying their vendor, but the money goes to criminals. Blake made a note on his tablet. Sounds like a client education problem, not a system design problem. I tried a different approach. Last year, a manufacturing company in Ohio lost $2.1 million because their CFO's email was compromised. The scammer sent a wire transfer request that looked completely legitimate. The only reason we caught it was because our system flagged an unusual recipient bank in Malaysia. That flag saved our clients money. Blake looked up from his tablet. And how long did that flag delay the transaction? 45 minutes, I admitted. 45 minutes of due diligence that saved $2 million. Or 45 minutes that annoyed 99.7% of our other clients who were trying to do legitimate business, Blake countered. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Look, Vivian, I respect your experience. But we can't let fear drive our business model. We need to trust our clients and our technology. I'm moving forward with the streamlined protocol. It goes live Monday. That was a Thursday. I had 4 days. I spent Friday building my case. I pulled every fraud attempt from the past 5 years, categorized them by type, and calculated the exact dollar amount we'd saved by catching them. The total was staggering, $63.4 million in prevented losses. I created a presentation with charts, case studies, and industry statistics showing that fraud was increasing, not decreasing. I scheduled a meeting with Anthony Reeves, our CEO, for Monday morning, 2 hours before Blake's new system went live. I was going to make him understand that speed without security was just expensive disaster in slow motion. Over the weekend, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the ways the new system could fail. Blake's streamlined protocol reduced verification steps, eliminated duplicate checks, and removed the manual review requirement for any transaction under $2 million. It was designed for speed, not safety. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I got to the office at 6:30, an hour before anyone else. I reviewed my presentation 3 times, checking every statistic, every graph, every argument. At 8 o'clock, I headed to Anthony's office on the executive floor. His assistant, Paula, gave me a sympathetic smile. He's running late, she said. Blake's in there now, actually. They're discussing the new system launch. My stomach dropped. Blake was getting there first, framing the narrative before I could present facts. I sat in the waiting area, watching the minutes tick by. At 8:40, Blake emerged looking pleased with himself. Vivian, he said, surprise in his voice that didn't sound genuine. What brings you up here? I have a meeting with Anthony, I replied. About the new transfer protocol. Blake's smile tightened. Oh, we just covered that. Everything's good to go. Anthony's excited about the efficiency gains. He walked away before I could respond. Paula's phone buzzed. She listened, then looked at me apologetically. I'm sorry, Vivian. Anthony needs to push your meeting to this afternoon. He has an emergency call with the board. I knew a brush-off when I saw one. What time this afternoon? Paula checked her calendar. How's 4 o'clock? The new system went live at 9. By 4 o'clock, it would already be operational for 7 hours. That's fine, I lied. I returned to my desk and pulled up the transaction monitoring dashboard. At exactly 9:03, I watched Blake's streamlined system activate. The interface changed, suddenly cleaner and simpler. Approval stages that used to show 17 checkpoints now showed 5. Transactions that would have required manual review were auto-approving based on algorithmic risk scores. It was elegant. It was fast. It was dangerous. Marcus rolled his chair over to my desk. It's live, he said quietly. I know. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. Transactions flowed through smoothly. Wire transfers that would have taken 2 hours now processed in 20 minutes. I watched the dashboard like a hawk, looking for anomalies, but the morning was routine. Payroll transfers, vendor payments, investment purchases, all standard activity. By 10:30, I started to wonder if maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe Blake's confidence wasn't arrogance. Maybe I was just resistant to change, stuck in old patterns because they were comfortable. Maybe paranoia wasn't protection after all. Then, at 10:47, I saw it. A wire transfer request came through from Holloway Manufacturing, one of our largest clients. Amount, $1.8 million. Recipient, Apex International Solutions. Receiving bank, First Pacific Trust, Singapore. The transaction triggered only 2 flags in Blake's system, high dollar amount and international recipient. Both flags were automatically overridden because Holloway had an established client status that Blake's algorithm considered low risk. Something felt wrong. I couldn't articulate exactly what, just a feeling that came from 2 decades of watching money move. I clicked into the transaction details. The wire transfer was initiated by Holloway's CFO, Patricia Vance. Email address confirmed. Authentication token verified. Recipient account details matched previous transactions to Apex International. Everything looked legitimate, but my instincts were screaming. I pulled up Holloway's transaction history. Over the past 3 years, they'd sent 6 wire transfers to Apex International Solutions, all for similar amounts, all processed without issues. This should have been routine. But I noticed something, the timing. All previous transfers to Apex happened on the 15th of the month. Today was the 23rd. I dug deeper, comparing the current request to previous ones. The email syntax was identical. The formatting was perfect. The authentication token matched their security protocol. But the requested transfer date was wrong. I picked up my phone and dialed Holloway Manufacturing's main line. After 2 transfers, I reached Patricia Vance's assistant. Hi, this is Vivian Cross from Cordell Financial. I need to speak with Patricia about a wire transfer. She's in meetings all morning, the assistant replied. Is it urgent? Yes, actually. It's regarding a $1.8 million transfer to Apex International that we received this morning. There was a pause. That's odd. Patricia specifically told me last week that the Apex payment wasn't due until the 15th of next month. She mentioned it because she wanted to ensure we had sufficient liquidity. My heart started pounding. Can you get her out of the meeting? This is genuinely urgent. The assistant must have heard something in my voice because she agreed immediately. 2 minutes later, Patricia Vance was on the line. Vivian? What's going on? Patricia, Did you authorize a wire transfer to Apex International this morning for $1.8 million? Absolutely not, Patricia said, her voice sharp with alarm. That payment isn't scheduled until November 15th. Why? What happened? We received a transfer request 40 minutes ago with your authentication credentials, I explained, my fingers already flying across my keyboard. I'm looking at it now. It appears to have come from your email address with proper verification. That's impossible, Patricia said. I'm looking at my sent folder right now. There's nothing here about Apex. Vivian, if you haven't processed that transfer yet, stop it immediately. I pulled up the transaction status. My blood turned to ice. Status, approved. Processing time, 14 minutes and 22 seconds. Amount cleared, $1,800,000. Recipient confirmation, pending. The transfer had been approved 14 minutes ago, processed through Blake's streamlined system without manual review. It was currently in the clearing phase, moving through the international banking network toward First Pacific Trust in Singapore. Patricia, I need you to do something right now, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. Contact your IT department immediately. Check if your email account has been compromised. Look for any unusual login activity in the past 72 hours. I hung up and immediately pulled up the wire transfer recall protocol. In the old system, I could have stopped this transaction at multiple points during the 17-step approval process. Now, with only 5 automated checkpoints, all already cleared, my options were extremely limited. International wire transfers are nearly impossible to reverse once they hit the clearing network. I had maybe 4 minutes before this money vanished into the Singapore banking system, where recovery would require international law enforcement, court orders, and months of legal proceedings. If we were lucky. I grabbed my phone and called Blake's extension. It went to voicemail. I tried his cell. Voicemail. I called Anthony's office. Paula answered. I'm sorry, Vivian, he's still on that board call. Paula, this is an emergency. We have an active fraud situation. I need Anthony now. Paula must have heard the urgency because she put me on hold. 30 seconds later, Anthony picked up. Vivian, I'm in the middle of, we have a fraudulent wire transfer in progress, I interrupted. $1.8 million to a fake account in Singapore. It was approved through Blake's new system 13 minutes ago. We have maybe 3 minutes to stop it before it clears. There was a pause. I could hear voices in the background. Are you certain it's fraudulent? Anthony asked. I spoke directly with the client. They did not authorize this transfer. Their email was compromised. This is business email compromise fraud, Anthony. I need authorization to initiate an emergency recall right now. Where's Blake? Anthony asked. I can't reach him. Anthony, we don't have time for discussions. Every second we waste, that money gets closer to disappearing. Another pause. I could hear him breathing, calculating. Do it, he finally said. Execute the recall. I'll find Blake. I hung up and immediately opened the emergency recall protocol. This was a nuclear option that required simultaneous coordination with our bank, the intermediary bank, and the receiving bank. I had done this exactly 3 times in my career, and we'd recovered the funds twice. I called our banking partner, United Commerce Bank, and got transferred to their wire operations center. This is Vivian Cross at Cordell Financial. I need to execute an emergency international wire recall. Transaction ID 77382449 Alpha. The operations manager, a woman named Teresa who I'd worked with before, immediately understood the severity. Pulling it up now. Okay, I see it. $1.8 million to First Pacific Trust, Singapore. Status shows it hit the SWIFT network 8 minutes ago. Can we stop it? I asked, already knowing the answer would be complicated. It's in the clearing queue, Teresa said. We can send a recall request, but Singapore is 12 hours ahead. First Pacific's business hours ended 4 hours ago. My heart sank. International wire transfers move through the SWIFT network, a secure messaging system that coordinates between banks globally. Once money enters that network, stopping it requires cooperation from every bank in the chain. And if the receiving bank isn't open for business, that cooperation becomes impossible. Send the recall request anyway, I said. Flag it as fraudulent, mark it urgent, and include my direct contact information. If anyone at First Pacific sees this before they process it, I want them to know we're actively trying to stop it. Sending now, Teresa confirmed. I could hear her typing. Vivian, you know the chances of this working are slim, right? Once funds hit the clearing network, especially international, recovery rate is less than 20%. I know, I said quietly. But we have to try. I hung up and immediately started documenting everything. Every email, every phone call, every timestamp. When the lawsuits started, and they would start, I needed proof that I'd done everything possible. Marcus appeared at my desk, his face pale. I just saw the transaction. Vivian, that went through in 14 minutes. Under the old system, it would have been flagged for manual review at step 4, I finished. I would have called the client to verify. We would have caught it. Blake appeared then, walking quickly toward my desk with Anthony beside him. Blake's confident expression had cracks in it now. I heard there's a problem, Blake said, his voice carefully controlled. A problem? I stood up, anger finally breaking through my professional composure. We just lost $1.8 million of client funds to fraud because your streamlined system has no actual security. Blake's jaw tightened. That's not fair. The system flagged the transaction as high risk. And then auto-approved it 14 minutes later, I shot back. The client never authorized this transfer. Their email was compromised. This is exactly the kind of fraud I warned you about. Anthony held up his hand. Everyone calm down. Vivian, what's the status? I took a breath and forced myself to speak professionally. The funds entered the SWIFT clearing network 18 minutes ago, destination First Pacific Trust in Singapore. I've initiated an emergency recall, but the receiving bank is currently closed for business. Realistically, by the time they open and process our recall request, the fraudsters will have already moved the money to secondary accounts. Recovery probability is less than 20%. Anthony's face went gray. $1.8 million. Of Holloway Manufacturing's money, I added. They're going to sue us for negligence. And they'll win, because we reduced our security protocols 2 hours before this happened. Blake found his voice. This isn't a system failure. This is a sophisticated attack that would have fooled any protocol. No, I said flatly. Under my protocol, this transaction would have been manually reviewed. I would have called Patricia Vance. She would have told me she didn't authorize it. Your protocol would have delayed 4,000 legitimate transactions last quarter, Blake countered. You can't design a system around paranoia. I designed a system around reality, I said. You designed one around wishful thinking. Anthony cut in before the argument could escalate further. Blake, in your professional opinion, can we recover these funds? Blake hesitated. I could see him calculating, trying to find an answer that didn't make him look responsible. It's challenging, he finally admitted. International fraud recovery is complex. But we have insurance for this exact scenario. Insurance that comes with a $250,000 deductible and a claim that will increase our premiums by 40%, I said. Plus, insurance doesn't cover reputational damage. When word gets out that we lost nearly $2 million because we prioritized speed over security, how many clients do you think will stay? The office had gone quiet. People were pretending to work while obviously listening to our conversation. Anthony looked between Blake and me. Vivian, I want a full incident report on my desk by end of day. Blake, I want your analysis of how we prevent this from happening again. And I want both of you to stop fighting and start fixing. He walked away, leaving Blake and me standing in tense silence. Blake leaned closer, lowering his voice. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You get to be right about being paranoid. I'm not enjoying anything, I replied coldly. I'm devastated that we just failed a client because someone valued efficiency over protection. And for the record, I tried to warn you. I documented every objection. I requested meetings. I built a case with 23 years of evidence. You called it paranoia and pushed forward. Anyway. Blake's expression hardened. This conversation is over. He walked away. Marcus waited until Blake was out of earshot before speaking. What happens now? I sat down heavily in my chair. Now we wait and hope that someone at First Pacific Trust catches our recall request before the fraudsters move the money. I spent the rest of the day building my incident report. Every detail documented with timestamps, emails, and call logs. I included my pre-implementation warnings to Blake, my objections during the planning phase, and the specific vulnerabilities I'd identified that led directly to this fraud. At 3:30, Teresa from United Commerce Bank called back. Vivian, I have an update. It's not good. I closed my eyes. Tell me. First Pacific Trust processed the incoming wire at 6:02 their time, which was about 40 minutes ago. The funds were immediately transferred to 3 separate accounts at different banks in Hong Kong, Philippines, and Indonesia. By the time our recall request was reviewed, the money was already gone. All of it? I asked, though I knew the answer. All 1.8 million. The accounts in question were opened within the past 72 hours using stolen identity documents. They're ghost accounts. The money's been laundered through multiple jurisdictions. Recovery is essentially impossible. I thanked Teresa and hung up. Then I walked to Anthony's office. Paula saw my face and immediately buzzed him. Send her in, I heard Anthony say. I entered and closed the door behind me. Anthony looked exhausted. We lost it all, didn't we? He asked. Yes, I confirmed. The funds were moved to ghost accounts across 3 countries within minutes of arriving. Professional operation, carefully planned. They probably compromised Patricia Vance's email weeks ago and studied Holloway's payment patterns before executing. Anthony rubbed his face. Blake's in with our attorneys right now. They're preparing for the inevitable lawsuit. We'll lose that lawsuit, I said. Because we knew this was a vulnerability and implemented the system anyway. I have emails proving I warned about exactly this scenario. Anthony looked at me for a long moment. You want me to say you were right? I want you to say you'll learn from this, I replied. I want you to restore the security protocols that actually work. 3 weeks later, Blake resigned. The board forced him out after Holloway Manufacturing filed a lawsuit seeking full restitution plus damages. Our insurance covered most of the loss, but the reputational damage was severe. 2 other major clients left within the month. I was promoted to Vice President of Risk Management with full authority over fraud prevention protocols. My 17-step verification system was reinstated, along with additional security measures I'd been requesting for years. Marcus became my deputy. On my first day in my new role, I held a company-wide meeting. Security and speed aren't enemies, I told the assembled staff. But when forced to choose between them, we choose security. Every time. Because trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy. 4 minutes, to be exact. I thought about those 4 minutes often. 4 minutes was all it took for $1.8 million to vanish. For minutes that could have been prevented by 17 checkpoints and one phone call. Sometimes paranoia isn't a weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing standing between safety and disaster.